Georgia, 1961. A sealed envelope was slipped under Ray Charles's dressing room door 30 minutes before showtime. He couldn't read it himself. He never could. So he handed it to his road manager, a man named Earl, and said, "Read it to me." Earl opened it, read it once, then read it again. Then he looked at Ray Charles and said nothing. "Earl," Ray said quietly. "What does it say?" Earl cleared his throat. "It says, cancel tonight's show, or you're going to jail." Ray Charles sat with that for a moment. The noise of the crowd was already bleeding through the walls. 4,000 people. They had paid, they had driven. Some of them had come from 2 states away. He reached out, took the envelope from Earl's hands, folded it carefully, and placed it in his breast pocket. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the stage. What happened next would get him banned from the entire state of Georgia. And 18 years later, it would make him a legend in that same state, forever. To understand why that envelope existed, you have to go back to 1960. Ray Charles was at the peak of his early career. Georgia on My Mind had just hit #1. Hit the Road Jack was coming. The world was beginning to understand what a small group of musicians had known for years, that Ray Charles was not just talented, he was generational. But 1960 in the American South was not a world that celebrated a black man's success without conditions. Jim Crow laws were not ancient history. They were Tuesday. They were the water fountain on the left, the entrance around the back, the concert hall divided, white audience up front, black audience in the back, separated by a rope that might as well have been a wall. Ray Charles had played segregated venues before. He had endured it the way most black performers of his era endured it. With silence, with professionalism, with the knowledge that the alternative was unemployment, or worse. But in Augusta, Georgia, in October 1961, something shifted. The Augusta Municipal Auditorium. October 18th. The contract for the show had been signed weeks earlier. The promoter had sold out the venue. But when Ray Charles arrived and saw the setup, black audience roped off in the back, white audience seated in the front, he made a decision that no one in his position had publicly made before. He called the promoter over. "I'm not playing a segregated show," he said. The promoter laughed. He actually laughed. "Ray, every show down here is segregated. That's just how it is." Ray Charles did not raise his voice. He never needed to. "Then I'm not playing." The promoter stopped laughing. Contracts were pulled out. Lawyers were mentioned. The word lawsuit entered the room. And then, from somewhere in the Georgia state government, came the suggestion that Ray Charles could be arrested for breach of contract and inciting disorder. That was the letter. That was what Earl had read to him in the dressing room. Not a request, a warning. Cancel the show, walk away, and nothing happens. Play it the way we tell you, or face the consequences. Ray Charles sat in that dressing room for 60 seconds after Earl finished reading. 60 seconds of silence. Then he stood up and walked toward the stage. He did not play a segregated show that night. The show was canceled, not by the letter, by him, on his terms. The fallout was immediate. The state of Georgia officially banned Ray Charles from performing anywhere within its borders. Formal, documented, permanent, or so they assumed. The man who had just recorded Georgia on My Mind, a song that made grown men weep with longing for that very state, was now legally barred from setting foot on a Georgia stage. He didn't fight it publicly. He didn't give interviews denouncing the ban. He kept touring. He kept recording. He kept playing. In every other state, on every other stage. But people who knew him during those years say he carried it. Not as bitterness. Ray Charles was not a bitter man. As a quiet, permanent awareness of what the world was and what it should be. Years passed. The civil rights movement changed America in ways that would have seemed impossible in 1961. The ropes in concert halls came down. The laws changed. The South changed, slowly, imperfectly, but it changed. And Ray Charles kept working. Through the 60s, through the 70s. But the ban in Georgia remained. Officially, quietly, embarrassingly, it remained. What no one in the Georgia state government seemed to notice, or perhaps they noticed and chose not to think about, was that Georgia on My Mind had become the unofficial anthem of their state. It played at sporting events, it played at political rallies, it played on the radio every single day. The song was Georgia, and the man who sang it was still banned. Then, in 1979, a state legislator named Bob Bray introduced a bill, not a complicated bill, a single, simple proposal. Make Georgia on My Mind the official state song of Georgia. The bill passed, unanimously. And then someone in the Georgia state legislature looked up from the paperwork and realized, we just made a banned man's song our official anthem. The invitation was extended personally. Ray Charles was asked to come to Atlanta, to the Georgia state capitol, and perform Georgia on My Mind live in the chamber for the legislators who had just voted to honor his song. He was 50 years old. Nearly 2 decades had passed since the envelope in the dressing room, since Earl's voice going quiet, since the 4,000 people who went home without a show. On April 24, 1979, Ray Charles walked into the Georgia State Capitol building. He sat down at a piano that had been placed in the center of the chamber. The same lawmakers who represented the state that had banned him were seated around him. The room went completely silent. He began to play. The opening notes of Georgia on My Mind filled the chamber. That slow, aching melody that sounds like longing itself. His voice came in, low and certain and enormous. Halfway through the song, a woman in the gallery began to cry. Then the man next to her. Then, one by one, the sound of the room changed. Not to applause, not yet. Just to that particular silence that happens when a large group of people are all feeling the same thing at the same time. Ray Charles could not see any of it. He could not see the tears. He could not see the faces. But he could feel the room. He always could. When the last note faded, the chamber erupted. A standing ovation from the same institution that had once put his name on a banned list. Someone later asked Ray Charles what he thought about in those final moments before he played. He smiled slowly. "I thought about Earl," he said, reading me that letter. "I thought, I wish he could have been in that room." Georgia officially rescinded the 1961 ban that same day. It had taken 18 years, but it was rescinded formally in writing with an apology on the record. Georgia on My Mind remains the official state song of Georgia to this day. It is played at ceremonies, at inaugurations, at funerals, and at celebrations. Every time it plays, it carries the full weight of what it cost to make it mean something. Ray Charles never said he forgave Georgia. He never said he didn't. What he said in an interview years later was this: music always wins. It just sometimes takes a little longer than it should. He was right. It took 18 years. But music won. If this story moved you, if you believe that artists who stand for something deserve to be remembered, subscribe. Because next week, we have another Ray Charles story, and it's even harder to believe.